This is the Domain Magnate Show, where you'll learn everything you need to know about buying, optimizing, and selling online businesses with your host, Michael Bereslasvky.
Welcome, listeners and viewers. In this episode, I'm talking to Ewen Finser from Venture Fourth Media. Hi, Ewen.
Hey, Michael. How's it going?
It's been good. So I'm really excited to catch up. We spoke last time about a year ago, and it's interesting that you took a slightly different direction in terms of going more with building new websites rather than buying sites, right? So tell us a little more about it and how did you get to it?
Yeah, so building has actually been my background. That's how I got started. Like so many people in this space, trying to get some income online, quit the day job. I feel like that's a very familiar story for many people. I started doing that in about 2013 and then was able to quit my day job in 2014, just building a couple sites from scratch, literally doing everything myself, from the content writing to the development to the literally A to Z content site publishing, and then kind of gradually matured in a very natural way from building sites one at a time to building a couple at a time, and then started adding in the content teams, started hiring writers, editors, basically building our competency in the content production process. And so my strength, I feel, has always been in the niche selection and kind of the planning around identifying market gaps and how do we fill that market gap with content. And so, really it's just a maturation over time. Today, we operate over 70 different websites. We have a bootstrap portfolio, which I still run, which is Venture Fourth Media. And then Venture Fourth is also kind of a manager of other, or a GP, if you will, of a couple other funds that kind of pool investor capital, traditionally just from one source, but we've also just recently kind of put together a little bit of a larger raise to go after 20 site launch, which is our most ambitious launch yet, to do 20 new sites at one time. But really it's, I've acquired sites, I've built sites, I've compared the pros and cons. I think there are objectively some strengths to building versus buying. And then I also just look at my skill set, and there's very few people, I think, in the industry who are actually building sites at scale. There's a lot of individual operators, and there's a lot of funds that are acquiring sites, but there's not a lot of funds, or that, to my knowledge, that are what I call incubating content brands from scratch.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, there is not that many people who focus on scaling the building process. I think one challenge really is just like it's not that easy. It's hard because of the constant Google updates. So how are you handling that? And by the way, there was a Google update just a few days ago, and then a few big ones in past months.
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting timing because that's been like all over the internet. I feel people asking me my opinion, but also just a lot of chatter in different groups about it. I actually, it's funny because I look at acquisitions and I think that's more risky. And so I think it just comes back to what's your skill set, and some people are very good at mitigating risk and doing due diligence on acquisitions. I don't necessarily think that's my strong suit. So that's kind of why I come to ground ups, because I can control all those variables that you talked about, right? So a big thing for me that I see in the market right now is content quality. I think that 95% of the sites that are for sale on any of the major marketplaces, I'm not going to single anyone out, but I'll say it's everywhere. The content is not really up to standard. It's not written by someone who's a subject matter expert, or it's written by maybe a non-native speaker, and it kind of, when you read it, it doesn't read naturally, I guess is the right way to say it, for the market that it's targeting. So, with the recent update, just for background, a lot of it was around Google saying, hey, we want to be cracking down on review sites that are not actually informing their readers with unique information. They're kind of just taking some Amazon description and regurgitating that into, a standard kind of copy paste, not copy paste, but copy and then reword it and then publish it. So it's funny because our sites, we've always been doing it the other way. We've always been focusing on quality writers who are experts in their vertical, and even starting 4 or 5 months ago, doing a huge push into video. That's been one of our growth initiatives because I think having video layered on top of your written content is going to be the easiest way to prove to Google that you are an expert. There's nothing that says expert more than someone who's actually reviewing a product or talking about it and sharing their expertise in an authoritative way. And so we've really leaned into this idea of expert authors and authorship, maybe long before it was even popular. And so we're not too concerned about that, actually. Our portfolio, again, we have a huge data set, but I would say for the vast majority of them are up with the recent update. There's a couple outliers, there's those sites that get caught up in the updates, but for the most part, I think it's actually been very rewarding for us. And I'm hearing about all these stories about sites being wiped out, but that's not what we're seeing. So I'm pretty optimistic, I guess cautiously optimistic, because you can never completely trust that Google will do the right thing. But so far, so good for the recent update.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. So I'd love to dive more into the details of how you're building them. But before that, just to get some numbers. So you mentioned you've built about 70 sites, and you also acquired quite a few, run some funds. So can you tell us a bit more about how much have you raised and how many deals have you acquired? How did that go also? And
so around 2017, 2018, I helped co-found this group called Owl Mountain Capital, and they're basically a capital allocator for the space. And we did some fairly large acquisitions in the content space, like some low seven figures, some 6 figures, just to kind of explore the market. And kind of the net result is that it's some were great, some were not so great, some were kind of break even, but it wasn't really the hockey stick return profile that we were expecting from acquisitions. So that is partly why we pivoted to doing ground ups. And so within Owl Mountain, I was kind of eager to try ground ups at scale, because historically, I would say if someone asked me, hey, could I invest and you do a ground up site? I'd say, well, I don't know if the economics work there. I don't know what the return profile is. So we launched something called Centerkeel Media, which is like a subsidiary or child company with Owl Mountain being the lead investor, and really around the concept of how can we prove the different variables around growing a site? What are the mile markers? So, people, the knock on ground ups is that it takes a while, right? It's the Google sandbox, there's all this other stuff. So I said, okay, let's measure that. And so let's use a very disciplined approach to doing that. I use a concept from Jim Collins, which is fire bullets and then cannonballs. And basically the idea is don't fire all of your capital in one shot. Fire, a little bit of it, a significant portion, but not a majority of it, on validating your hypothesis first, seeing what the results are, and then doubling down on the winners. So we kind of took a portfolio approach. We launched 10 sites. Each site, we wanted to get over 100 articles, ideally 150 articles. So each site received between $10,000 and $15,000 for seeding the content. And then we just let the site sit. They're in different verticals, but we just wanted to see, okay, well, I think these are good verticals, but what do I know? Let me see what Google says. Let me see what the world says about these sites. And then just being very, very patient and waiting to get the proof, to be honest, to see which sites are growing faster. And then around 9 to 12 months, you start to see sites generating traffic. And there are some winners, there are some losers, and sometimes they're not the ones you expected. And so then once a site, how we've set up now, once a site gets past around 20,000 page views per month, we say, okay, it's gone from being a bullet to a cannonball. And a cannonball gets anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 in additional capital to kind of double down because it's been proving itself out. And so we do that on a portfolio basis. And we just fund the winners and we double down the winners, and we kind of forget about the sites that are not working. We don't even spend time, really trying to figure out why or what happened. Maybe later we'll go back and do something with them, but the idea is to optimize in the most efficient manner around the best possible candidates, rather than worrying about the ones that aren't working so well. So that's kind of the incubator in a nutshell. But that's been my experience. So coming from doing the acquisitions, we have done acquisitions, to my work is really now focused on the ground up, and we're launching in May, actually just around the corner. We'll be launching a new fund for $600,000 for 20 sites. So we're doing a stair step from 10 to 20, and we're going to see how that goes. And then the idea is every, I'd say 6 to 9 months, doing another cohort launch of 20, 30 sites, and just continually doing that over and over again for as long as we can, and as long as there's a good ROI, and constantly kind of reevaluating the process along the way. So that's really been my focus more recently. I'd say the last 2 years, almost 100% focused on ground ups versus acquisitions.
All right, cool. So you've raised some capital, you've acquired some 6-7 figure deals, and then you also tested a little bit building sites from scratch, and then decided that this is a better approach for you. And what are the results like? So it's been at least 2 years kind of focusing on it fully. And do you have some numbers you can share in terms of profitability? Have you how soon do you expect to receive the investment back, and what percentage of sites are successful?
Yeah, so we built a model. That's the fun part about it. You build the model and then you test it and you figure out where you were wrong. And I love that process of learning something new and proving myself wrong. So the first incubator was $250,000 for 10 sites. And so for me, there were some important return profiles. Like obviously getting earnings, to a certain level is important. But then the nice thing about the space is then you can also do the asset value calculation. So the earliest indicator was back in November and December. I think December we reached $11,000 per month in top line revenue from those 10 sites. So we can start to do the math. Like, okay, if this number holds, and it was December, so maybe we're a little aggressive. Let's say it's $10,000 a month is what it's going to do. We kind of look at the forward earnings profile and we say, okay, we've basically made our money back. If you do the asset value, do a 3x, let's say, of a forward earnings multiple, you can get that 1x. So that was very important because I wanted to see how long does it take us to get, on paper, a 1x asset value return. And so the answer for our process is anywhere between 16 to 18 months, which is actually faster than I expected. It's still not a quick win in my book, but it's a lot faster than I expected. And then to date, so January and February are typically down months, which they were because of the seasonality. And then March, our projection is that we're coming close to $13,000 per month. So that's really we're 20 months in. That's a good reassurance for us that we're approaching it 2x, maybe 3x. We're getting close to that. And then May will be the 2-year mark. I'd like to get to $15,000, let's say, by the end of May. And then the really interesting part, I think, happens in the next year, because then we have 10 sites. And you asked about the distribution. I'd say 4 of the 10 sites were cannonballs. And two of them are kind of in this bucket of they're late bloomers. Like they're growing, but they're growing a lot more slowly. And then I'd say there's maybe 3 or 4 that are kind of really slow, and so I'm kind of not focusing on them. And I'd say, well, one of those 3 is, I'd call it dud. It just never took off, and that's okay. We modeled that. We modeled actually 1 site never doing anything, 3 sites that were just would grow, but not to the level that we would want to reinvest. And then we modeled 3 to 5 sites that would be growing like a cannonball, and they'd get a capital allocation as they have. So our model has proven to be remarkably accurate in terms of the distribution of winners. What we didn't expect was we have one site in particular that's a huge outlier on the upside. Like we didn't model a site that could grow that quickly, or get to over, one of the sites is over I think $6,000 in revenue, which represents like almost 50% of the earnings. But that was not what we expected. So there's a little bit of variance on that front. But overall, if we do that, I'm just going to get my calculator out. If we do that math, so let's just say $13,000, and it's March, so I think that those numbers will hold. It's not December, it's not Q4. So obviously on an annual basis, it's 156,000. If you do a 3x multiple, that's 468. If we do a 3.5, 546. And I've seen some multiples above 4, so let's just do 4. That's like 624. So we look at that initial $250,000 invested, we're well above a 2x, in my opinion. So based on the results, so that's pretty exciting. And so we're just going to see how far can we scale this. Can we do 20 launches? Can we do 30 launches? What breaks in the process? Because that's the other component. But really, it's been good validation for us that we're actually onto something here. It takes a little bit longer. We have to be patient, but that's who we are. We're like a patient company. We're not looking for any like overnight success.
That's nice. So these 10 sites were from that one project, but you mentioned you had, or is that like the bulk of your portfolio now, or do you have a bunch of other sites also you're managing currently?
Yeah, so I have what I call my Skunk Works, which is my own bootstrap company, which we've grown sites from scratch for years. The issue with a bootstrap company, as you probably know, is that you don't always have the capital available to kind of invest the way an asset deserves to be invested in. So we kind of have sites all over the map, but that personal portfolio in terms of asset value is, I'd say around, it's probably over 3 million at this point, if not more. So we have sites that are kind of mature, that are in the 6 figures, a handful of those. We have sites that are maybe mid 5 figures, a whole bunch of those, and some smaller ones. But very kind of I would say haphazard growth, because we didn't have an outside capital source where we could just kind of plug in $250,000. And so that's the advantage of what we're doing, is that now we can be disciplined in our allocation versus kind of reinvesting whatever we have available that month.
That's nice. And how are you managing those currently? Is it all with your internal team, or do you outsource a lot? Yeah, how is it structured?
Yeah, so we've kind of have taken a very, I guess, organic approach to the organization structure. We have kind of what I call a C-suite, which they're basically fractional folks, full-time COO basically, but then we have a CFO, fractional CFO. We have a fractional, what I call chief revenue officer. And those are kind of the people that help me at the strategic level make decisions in their various functions. I'd say the most important function is our content production process. That is, like I tell people, in this business, content is your product, right? And so we have to get that right. We have a team of over 100 different writers, kind of in our Rolodex, but they're part-time, they're freelance, but just people that we can call on. We've built a custom software kind of system, content management system, that manages the workflow of assigning topics and doing revisions and paying writers. I found that was a huge friction point, was that either I or one of my managers would have to be going back and forth via email or Dropbox or whatever, like, hey, the articles were delivered. The writer says, hey, I sent the invoice. And they're kind of sending them at random times. There's no like discipline to it. There's no kind of systemization. And so what I want to create was like, we call the content conveyor belt, just like an assembly line. Basically, the writer logs into a WordPress dashboard where they can see all the available topics that they are tagged to, that they have permission to see across all of our assets, all of our sites. Let's say there's one writer who's an expert in automotive and fitness. They'll see the sites that are relevant to their expertise. And then each writer profile has a rate per word built in. So as they're writing in that WordPress editor, it's calculating, how much they've written, what they're owed. And then it gets, there's a submission process where they have to follow our SOPs, submit it to the editor. Did you include the right title tags? Did you include the schema markup? All these different kind of technical things. The editor will review it for both the technical stuff and also the content quality. And then they'll push back if they need to. But if it's approved and goes to approval status, there's then an API that pushes that article in WordPress draft to the right site. So it'll push it to the child site, if you will, the main site where the article will go live. And then it goes to that site as a draft, but it's all ready for publication. So we've already kind of saved ourselves a lot of time. And then the fun thing is on the back end for me, because I handle a lot of the payments, or I used to. We have PayPal MassPay integration, so we can kind of auto-generate invoices for all of our writers based on all the sites they're writing for. Gives us a nice paper trail for the accountants. But then, it's an easy payment system. We do payments bi-monthly, so once in the middle of the month, once at the end of the month. And it works really, really well. The writers are happy because they know when they're getting paid. And we're happy because we're not just responding to random emails that are coming in or random requests. And so that's a big part of our structure would be that process itself. And then we've been building out what we call the monetization team, which has its own manager, and they're in charge of just working with our affiliate partners. We work with a lot of non-Amazon brands. We have a very deep, I think, knowledge base of all the affiliate players because we have so many sites and so many different verticals. We can easily pull from that database and say, okay, who's the best affiliate for this site? We can test things out. And we're also building an outbound process where we can go to big brands and kind of pitch them on, sponsored placements. That's one way to call it. But really for them to, we get a lot of inbound from brands saying, hey, could you write some articles about our products? And typically we have so many opportunities, it's hard for us to give a good answer about, hey, when can we get this up? But with the sponsored article process, we can basically put together a media kit for the brand, put together a package of 10 or 20 articles around something they care about, some topics they care about, and have it branded with their affiliate links. And so we're doing a lot of stuff around that. I'm trying to think what else, but I think that's the focus. It's really content production, monetization. We have an email marketing team. We do that as well. And our big push right now is into video. So we're standing up kind of a video team where we're trying to see if our writers, as many as possible, can also shoot video. And so we kind of have that process running, also sourcing new video from people that are in their topical area, creating video content anyway, who would be interested in submitting videos. So that's fairly straightforward kind of overview of what we have going on. I'd say the core is still content, but we've evolved over the years to kind of add on some different management functions too.
Okay, and so with content, first of all, I'm curious, what's a typical price you pay per article, and are those all American or native English writers, and how do you find the best ones?
Yeah, so that's someone's take it for granted that we have such a good writer team. I find it relatively easy to pre-qualify writers. We pay anywhere from 3 cents to 8 cents a word, depending on the subject matter expertise of that writer and the technical nature of the work. In terms of where to find them, there's the standard places I recommend. I recommend ProBlogger if people are looking for kind of experienced writers. But also kind of thinking outside the box. And there are certain verticals. I'll give you a good example. Auto enthusiasts or like mechanics. Typically a mechanic is not going to be writing, right? They're going to be working on a car somewhere in the shop or doing something like that. So how do you find those people and kind of bring them online? And so we've had success, using Craigslist. It's kind of a non-traditional way of finding writers, but that's worked. And then also going into forums and just posting for, saying, hey, looking for some writers. Facebook groups works as well. and just kind of going a little bit off the beaten path. And a lot of times you're going to find super passionate writers who like just wish that someone would come along and pay them 3 cents a word. That doesn't seem cheap to them. It's like, wow, I've been writing about this anyway in this forum. Now I can write about it for this blog and get paid to do it. That's great. And so, yeah, I think we look kind of at multi-channel kind of recruitment strategies, but thinking a little bit outside the box and not just going to Upwork. Although we do that as well. And yeah, to answer your question, it's primarily native speakers. Although, anyone who can, speak and write, in English, I think is great. Obviously, we have a content filter for that. But we have travel writers from all over the world. It just depends on the vertical. But there are certain verticals where they kind of have to be a US based writer because they're talking about, US based products. And so that's probably the bulk of our writers are US based.
Okay. Yeah, we do similar. ProBlogger has been good and finding people for groups. Now what we've also started doing is, like, many writers know other writers, and good people usually recommend good people. So just like asking for recommendations has been good. Yeah. And basically we just try to keep the good ones, and we pay a similar rate as well. Yeah. So that's pretty standard, I guess. Upwork, we haven't had good luck with Upwork. That's been the last few times we've used it, we've had like so many inquiries and just almost none of them looked good.
Yeah.
Getting
the writers off of Upwork too, I think, is key for us because we have this whole process. And so, it's not really Upwork isn't the right mechanism for us. It's a good place to find people or writers, but, working with an Upwork, it's its own kind of crazy system. So we try to, work with writers one-to-one.
Yeah. So let's talk more about SEO. Do you build backlinks? What else do you do besides content to rank these websites?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because we don't do a whole lot of off page, and that's maybe a weakness of ours. I think it definitely is a weakness, but it's something we strategically decided many years ago. I kind of looked at the whole backlinking game and I said, is this something I really want to become an expert in? It seems a little bit like, what's the word I use? It's a little bit like this kind of, it's alchemy, basically. It's this weird science of turning something into gold where it only works in the context of Google. It's a function that works for Google. There are some benefits to having an outreach process for sure. You could do other things with that, but I just strategically decided years ago, let's focus on content first and see how far that gets us. I think a lot of times people are doing everything at once, and so it becomes really hard to separate the causality. Are you ranking well because of your interlinking? Are you ranking well because of your content quality? Are you ranking well because of your links? And so if you're doing all of those things at the same time, it can be very difficult to determine, what's causing what. So I try to take a content first approach. We do some outreach like later on, say when a site is 6 to 9 months old, but really just to get, maybe 5 to 10, referring domains from quality sources. We're not, there's no keyword density, this or that. We're just really trying to get on the radar of Google. And it's all very natural. And we find over the years that our sites tend to rank on content, and they do attract links naturally. And I know people think that doesn't work, and I would say it does work. It's just a lot slower. But again, we're very patient with our process, and so we're not too worried with staying ahead of the game when it comes to links. We're just kind of betting that in the future, links are going to become less and less relevant. And other kind of signals will become more and more important for the rankings.
Yeah, makes sense. And so you build a new site, you add a bunch of content, occasionally you add some videos, and probably do the keyword research, do the topic research, find some good affiliate monetization options, right? And at what stage do you start monetizing it? Do you put some ads right away? Do you put them later? And also, do you mainly use different affiliate programs? Do you also use ads, Mediavine, and everything?
Yeah, so our approach is kind of a hybrid between ads and affiliate. To answer your question about monetization, we don't monetize our sites until they get to that, what I call the cannonball stage. So above 20,000 page views a month. It's not that we couldn't make money earlier on. It's just that it wouldn't be optimizing for the right thing. We're trying to figure out, is this site worth our time first? And then once we've determined that it is, then we'll start monetizing. But also above 20,000 page views, you start to get into the territory where you can monetize with some of these ad networks like AdThrive or Mediavine or Ezoic. I mean, Ezoic you can do from the start, but it gets interesting once you get higher level of page views. So we've kind of set a bar for where we start monetizing, and then we kind of just roll through those sites on a conveyor belt and monetize it all at once. And so in terms of your question about affiliates, like traditionally, I'd say if you talked to me 4 or 5 years ago, 90% of our revenue was from Amazon associates. Today, it's like 10%. We kind of swung very hard in a different direction. And so, we literally have hundreds and hundreds of affiliate partners, and they're on Share Sales, CJ, all these other networks, Rakuten. A lot of programs we've actually discovered. We reached out to the brands and told them about the affiliate marketing landscape, and they created a program just for us. And so that's kind of a unique advantage. A lot of the programs we have higher than advertised rates, which takes a lot of work to get to that point with Affiliate Manager, which is not something you can necessarily do with Amazon. You can't negotiate with your account manager, really. But with these little brands or even the bigger brands, they're much more open to that. And then we also do what I call these sponsored brand packages, where basically the brand is paying us upfront for our content production cost. So there's typically some benefit there. I'm trying to think of anything else. We do have a handful of sites where there's digital products, and I think that's kind of where we draw the line. Like anything past digital products, we're not too interested in. Even drop shipping and e-com. Eventually we might do something in that space, but we just like to stick to what we know, which is the affiliate landscape. But I mean, what I think is what people are realizing is that the affiliate landscape beyond Amazon is truly massive, and there's so much opportunity. There's a lot of risk. There's a lot of programs that are not great, that don't pay out on time, that don't convert well. But then the advantage just becomes your data. The advantage becomes your experience, your conversion rates, all that stuff that is very unique, knowledge that you can then leverage and build more sites, let's say, in that neighborhood around that affiliate that's working really well. So yeah, I'd say today it's a mix of affiliate and display ad, and then doing some brand sponsorships as well.
Yeah, we've been doing some similar things, trying to take many sites of Amazon. We've actually found that pretty much any program is going to be willing to pay a higher commission rate. I mean, unless of course it's Amazon, Google, or something massive. And then but pretty much any program on affiliate network, if you reach out to them directly, you have a call with them, you talk to them, you tell them who you are, they would generally be willing to pay a higher rate. Like at some, we've been able to negotiate rates like 3 times higher in very competitive spaces. But what we found, the biggest challenge is that there are many niches that you would find a lot of programs on these networks, like CJ, Linkshare, and all that, and they just pay like 5% or maybe even like 8%. But in the end, it's less than Amazon, because even if Amazon might be paying 3%, the conversion rate is so high. And then it's really hard to compete. Even if they pay you a higher rate, like 10 or 12, they increase it, it often doesn't come close to Amazon. So that's been often a challenge in many industries. I'm curious if
I would agree.
Do you solve it by going to specific niches where there are some really good affiliate programs, or are you just
part of it. I think in our launch process, one of the validation steps before we launch is to go out and kind of build what I call the Rolodex of all the possible affiliate partners. I compare their advertised rates. I add in if I have knowledge of higher rates that they pay or experience, what their numbers are, what their conversion rates are. If we have experience, let's say we work with Home Depot, for example, we might have 7 different sites, in different kind of verticals that would, work with Home Depot. We can kind of compare the conversion rates and see, is it worth it? Because that to answer your question, I think, you have to know your numbers. And I agree, a lot of times Amazon's great because they convert. But I would also say that there are verticals where Amazon's not equal across every category. Like they have some very strong categories and they have some categories that are typically out of stock or don't have a great landing page. So just being very thoughtful about that both ways and being flexible and saying, you know what, I'll let the data kind of prove to me which is the better place to send people. But yeah, I would say looking at the big networks, just testing things out. Um, and and yeah, not being afraid to negotiate. I think it's a lot for people like us. Sometimes I know traditionally, I'm maybe a little more introverted. I would just want to like monetize the site and not really talk to people. But just reaching out to an affiliate manager, sometimes they'll just offer to bump your rate just for saying hi, and so then being able to establish a relationship that in the future could lead you to increase. And then the other thing is you can, in a good way, play different affiliates off of each other or partners off of each other. This is a bad example because they're really big, but like Home Depot and Lowe's, right? Like they're very competitive. So you can kind of go to their affiliate managers and say, hey, Home Depot's paying me 10%. Could you do 12? And kind of go back and forth that way. And what I always say to people is $1 of Amazon revenue and $1. If the choice is between $1 of Amazon and $1 of non-Amazon, I'm always going to take the $1 that's non-Amazon because there's potential. I feel there's more security in that relationship. So that's just my overall opinion. But I would agree with you that there are still many cases where Amazon is the better solution. But I think if you just have to make sure that I want to make sure that I dig as far as I can before saying that Amazon is the best place to go, because a lot of times it's not necessarily the case, but it's just a matter of finding all the affiliates, because that's its own problem to find them.
Right. So do you have an affiliate network or an ad network that's your favorite? And in terms of ad networks, I mean like the more advanced ones like Ad5 that require higher minimum page views. Yeah, and for affiliate networks, there are quite a few. There are also the ones like you mentioned with Home Depot and big brands, but you also have all the different CPA offers and all the different performance networks. So I'm curious if you have any specific ones that you've had the most success with.
Yeah, I mean, on the affiliate side, I would say it kind of is vertical specific. I mean, if you're in the outdoor space, for example, AvantLink is great. They have like REI and a lot of these big outdoor brands. Share. They all have pros and cons. I think CJ has tracking problems sometimes, or the data fidelity is not great. ShareASale has a great interface, easy to use, but doesn't report as much data back. So there's pros and cons. We use a tool called Affluent, which I think Impact Radius just acquired them, but Affluent is a program that on the publisher side aggregates all of your affiliate programs. There's other programs out there. I think Athlytics. There's a couple other like competitors. Trackonomics is a kind of an upmarket competitor, but that can aggregate, because that's the problem, right? Is the data is then all over the place. How do you pull that all in so you can analyze it? So we use that to aggregate. Recommend people check those out. And then on the ad side, I said we're about 50-50 AdThrive, Mediavine. I kind of like it that way because they're very comparable, and there's some platform risk of just being on one. So my experience is it's vertical specific. In general, they're very, very comparable. Like their RPMs are going to be within $2 or $3 of each other. The one thing I will say is that they do have vertical specific strengths, and they're not published. These are not publicized. Like the ad networks are not going to say we're not good in this vertical. They're just going to want to get as many people as they can. So I would just look very carefully at that and evaluate that. And if you have two sites in a similar vertical, put one on AdThrive and one on Mediavine, and just kind of measure. We have one example of that right now. We're looking at two different sites in a similar vertical. One's on AdThrive, one's on Mediavine, and their RPMs are slightly different, maybe $3 or $4 apart. And so we kind of ask their team, why is this, and how can we optimize it? And maybe we switch one site over. I think they're both great. I would say other programs to look at. Ezoic is fine, I think, for an AdSense alternative, but slightly lower RPMs in our experience. But yeah, I'd say AdThrive, Mediavine, and then really any affiliate program. But the key for me is integrating it into a data source, which is Affluent or something like that.
Yeah, we've had a similar experience. Like Ezoic might be a little bit better than AdSense, but usually performs less than Mediavine and AdThrive. Although it does depend on niche. By the way, we had the co-founder of Mediavine on our podcast last year, and she mentioned some interesting things about it as well, that they kind of like focused more on female traffic, female-driven websites like mom's blogs, cooking, and I think that's probably one of their strengths. So in those niches, they're probably the best. And at Thrive, I think they also have more like tech-related sites, things like that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I think it also does change, because they're basically what they're doing is they have the ad tech, which is integrating all the different ad partners basically and all the different bidding systems. But then they also do like outreach to the brands. So it's kind of like, well, who do they have in their back pocket? Do they have a major brand that's relevant for your vertical? And they don't necessarily tell you that. You just kind of have to figure that out. Because that's the X factor to me is, what's their sales process to these other big brands. And you can kind of see, who's advertising on your site. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of I would recommend that one of those two, if someone's at the traffic threshold, and that's the big thing, it's just getting to the threshold is half the battle. Either one of those is probably good, but then being open to testing it out and seeing which one works better.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. So monetization is important, but I would imagine in that line of business, the main challenge really is getting the traffic. So I want to circle back to how you do that, because writing good content is important, but in most niches, you are going to be up against lots and lots of other websites that also write good content. So you got to have something that separates you from the pack.
I would say, and controversially maybe, but I would say that good content is subjective, and it's there. I would just argue that a lot of content is not good that's put out, or it's mediocre, I guess is the right word. It's not bad. It's just kind of okay.
What's like your task to just read it, or
yeah? So it's funny because I was talking to some other people the other day about someone's get asked on due diligence questions like, "Hey, is this a good buy? Can you take a look at it?" And I've seen some really complicated due diligence spreadsheets that are like 6 tabs deep, with all these different processes. And my proprietary system, so please don't copy it, is to take the URL, put it in Ahrefs, find the top article, and read it. And that's all I do. Because 9 times out of 10, that'll tell me everything I need to know about that site. I mean, the content is the product. If you read that article and you're like, this doesn't make any sense, or this person is like all over the place and they've used clearly they've just used Surfer SEO to throw in a bunch of NLP. Sometimes they read very, very interesting because it's clearly someone who was low budget writer and then someone optimized the article with Surfer. So it has these big phrases thrown in there, as if someone knows what they're talking about, but then without the context. It's just random phrases. It's like back to the days of keyword stuffing. And so that's my big thing, is just read the article. And so I would argue that literally go to any of the brokers or any of the places you would buy content sites today. And I'm not going to name names, but I would say almost every single marketplace, most of the sites for sale, the content is very poor. But most people buying sites don't start with that analysis. They start with the P&L analysis. They look at the niche. They go, oh, this is an interesting vertical. It doesn't matter, because the asymmetric downside is a site goes to 0 or a site declines 50%, and that can throw the entire kind of model off base. And so, so I think content, to me, quality is, obviously not just the kind of the semantic words that they use, but also the expertise that's communicated by the writer. We'd like to have our author profiles front and center. Like we talked about, doing video, incorporating video and original photography into our articles as much as possible. And really covering the topic in depth, being the most comprehensive resource. So there's little tactical things like making sure you have frequently asked questions, making sure you have a part in the article where you're discussing the criteria for how you evaluate these products and the data-driven processes around that. A lot of times what I see is sites that I see affiliate content sites, and I just tell people we don't build affiliate review sites, we build content brands. And so part of that means speaking to the entire audience, not just the audience, part of the audience that's going to make you money. And so with ad networks, that makes it easier, because you can still make money on informational topics, but really focusing on building a base. So if you're talking about, I'm trying to think of an example, dogs or something, of course, everyone's going to write about what's the best dog food and send people to Chewy. That's obvious, right? But what about all the common dog ailments? What about, how to train your dog in different ways? What about dog names? Just thinking about that person and serving them entirely. And I kind of use the analogy of here in the US, you go to like a bookstore, Barnes and Noble or whatever, there's this section of the bookstore where all these magazines are. It's kind of like the magazine rack. And that's basically what we were doing, is we're taking that offline experience of a passionate magazine that was created just for you, with whatever you're interested in, whether it's horseback riding or automobiles or motorcycles, and then creating a digital equivalent. And so sometimes the content we publish has very low probability of making a lot of money. And that's okay, because we're covering the topic completely from A to Z. We're really being a resource for that user. And so a lot of the sites, when you visit our sites, you couldn't initially really tell that they were affiliate sites. That's kind of my one rule of thumb. It's like, when you visit it, does it feel like an affiliate site, or does it feel like a media site? And that's, I think, the difference. It's a subtle difference. But yeah, I think that's my big argument, I guess, is that a lot of sites are not doing content. They're not taking content quality seriously.
Do you have like author profiles? Do you have a whole author persona made up, or maybe even like use the real ones from one of your writers? How do you work on that?
We like to use our real author. It's easier for us, like, to have the authors submit, and even if they want to link out to their own blog or something, like, we're okay with that. Link out to their LinkedIn profile or their Facebook. We let them share who they are and why they're interested in this vertical. It's part of our vetting process when we hire them. If they don't have a passion or expertise in the area, if they're just kind of a general copywriter, we probably won't hire them, because, again, the thing that doesn't scale is expertise, and we want to make sure that is highlighted. So we have about pages, we have sites that have editorial policies, we have contributing writers, editors, kind of, again, doing the thing that a magazine would do, basically. It doesn't mean that we have to pay people necessarily like a full-time salary. It just means that we're highlighting their experience in the best possible way.
Yeah, that's pretty good strategy. So it sounds like you're really planning things long term to make sure that these sites last long time and do well and continue to grow. That's important.
Yeah, we kind of have to, because we're doing the ground up, right? It's just like you said earlier on, like we're not into flipping websites, and that's a whole business model. You come in, you flip the website, you let it cash flow for 6 to 12 months and then sell it. That's a great model. Not something that I think there's a lot of really talented people doing that. I don't want to compete with those people. I'd rather compete I'd rather take a 5-year time horizon, and grow a site over that period from scratch, and do it the right way. So, and I think ultimately, it's kind of like, people say this a lot, but optimize for where Google's going, versus what their algorithm says right now, or what you can get away with right now.
Okay, and in terms of content, so what's the average length of the articles, and how many articles they usually add on the site? Is it like added continuously or all at once?
Yeah, so I kind of it's whatever is needed, right, for that top. So sometimes there's short form, and we're fine doing short form and long form. And in fact, if you can do a combination of, think about the questions like, how much does, I don't know, how much does a bag of bricks weigh or something? That can be that doesn't need to be 3,000 words, right? That can be, 500 words, but then interlinked to your main hub article. So I would say, but I'd say in general, we're at least 2,000 words, if not more, 3,000 words for a standard article. But it just depends. Depends on the article type. If it's a roundup, if it's a tutorial, if it's a top of the funnel informational article versus a review. We actually don't do that many reviews. It's kind of funny with the review update. Like a very low percentage of our content is XYZ review. Most of it's like informational or comparisons or tutorials or roundups that are interlinked with all those informational topics.
That's pretty good. And how big are most of your websites? Like how many articles do you usually have there?
I like to get, for the initial validation, I want to get over 100 articles. I think if you're less than 100 articles, maybe you can get away with 50 to test the market, but you won't have enough topical relevance in a particular area to get traction with Google. And so that's, I think, a lot of times where people give up. Where I've given up in the past on sites is I only launched with 13 articles or 15 articles. And then I just didn't see any results. So I just forgot about it because it wasn't doing anything. But it's really not enough of a data set and not enough of a topical array of articles for you to build any kind of authority. But on the flip side, if you can do over 100 articles, you could have literally 0 links. But if you have over 100 articles talking about, I don't know, I saw a site on Flip the other day about koi ponds, like you're going to rank because you're covering that topic completely. So that's my general rule of thumb, is try to get over 100 articles for a new site.
All right. Well, thanks. That was quite interesting. What would be some advice you give to people who are looking to build new sites? So what are some common mistakes people usually make? Because a lot of our listeners are probably doing something similar or planning to emulate different strategies.
Yeah. So I would say, and I think this is a lesson learned for me. There's like the old way of teaching kind of how to start a blog, which is find your vertical, do your keyword research, and then go all in and just keep writing until it works. I would argue, even if you only have, $10,000 or $5,000, to take at least 3 concepts and launch 3 sites at the same time. Let's say if you're limited on capital, and even if you're writing all the content yourself, if you can outsource a little, that's great. Just to get enough of the data set to understand success or failure, because you can pick the wrong vertical, create great content, and not get much traction, and then your lesson learned is going to be that niche sites don't work, or this whole affiliate marketing thing is dead. It's really about getting a broad enough data set and experience to know where the pockets are. And so I would recommend, depending on how much capital you have, just create a data-driven approach where here's how much capital you have. You're going to test out, with X dollars of that budget, test out 3 sites, see which one starts to rank first, and then take your reserve capital and double down. I think you can do that with any amount of capital or time that you have available. And so that's my big thing, is not to get overly attached to one site. Although I know some people that have done amazingly well with one site primarily, but I think that's, and it's a lot to their own skill, their credit that they've done that, but it's also that they picked the right vertical. If they had done the same thing in the wrong vertical, they would have wasted a lot of money. So that's my whole thing, is just to try to take a little bit of the portfolio theory and apply it to your business. And it also helps you become less emotionally attached to your site. So you can kind of make those decisions about buying and selling and improving in a more rational way than just like, this is my baby, I need to, I'll never sell it, and I need to spend more and more money on it. So I guess that'd be my only advice. And then find something that works and just stick with it. If you have YouTube working, great, just do that. If you have, a certain type of content, recipes or something, just do that. don't worry about what someone else is doing. You can learn that later once you have a really successful website. But until you get that traction, it's not going to help focusing on different things.
So build free websites, write a lot of content, but how long should you really work on it until you know if it works or doesn't? And if it, if it doesn't really work out, at what point is it maybe time to give up or move on?
Yeah. I mean, that's a personal question. I think it'll depend a little bit on what your tolerance is for pain. Um, but I would say, set a threshold in your head and say, I said 100 articles, but maybe it's, for you say 30 articles across 3 sites or 50 articles across 3 sites. And then give yourself a time period. So if you're launching a new site, I would say you have to give yourself at least 12 months or get above 50 articles at least before you can really tell if it's working or not. So if you're under that time horizon or that article count, you can't really say if you failed or succeeded. It's an open question. And so you can still give up at that point, let's say 20 articles in, but I would say you're not really answering the question. I would personally want to focus on getting over those hurdles.
So is there some time frame that's realistic until you reach a point where it can be monetized? Let's say like 5 or 10,000 visitors per month. That's usually enough to get like some decent revenue. Would it be half a year, more? Like what's average?
Yeah, I would say, if you don't, let's say you don't really have an aggressive link building strategy, that can change things. Or if you're building on an expired domain, but those are like advanced tactics that I wouldn't expect someone just starting off to have. I would say give yourself 9 to 12 months to kind of just see how things go. And I would agree, get above 5,000, 10,000. I mean, at 5,000 page views, you can make some money. You'll probably spend a lot more time trying to make money than it's worth. I mean, I'd rather, if I had a choice between monetizing at 5,000 page views versus writing a bunch more articles, I would do that. But it's all dependent on, what's your capital available, what's your time available. But I would kind of wait till you get above 10,000 sessions or page views. But it's also dependent a little bit on your vertical. If you're not very high ticket vertical, that might make sense. But if you're just selling, I don't know, if you're selling like dog collars, I don't know if you probably want to wait a little bit because it's not going to be a ton of revenue. But if you're selling, I don't know, something more high end like refrigerators or something, yeah, maybe you start monetizing early.
All right, so 20, 30 articles, wait a year. And by the way, do you use expired domains, or do you buy new domains for everything?
I've mostly bought new domains, but we have been testing out in our skunkworks in our lab. We've been testing out the efficacy of expired domains, and we have some pretty good success stories, but it's a little bit too early to tell. I kind of get concerned with expired domains of, is it just tricking Google and will they slap the site at some point? I don't know. I've only been doing it for about a year. So I don't have the full data set, but I would say, I think it's an interesting investment opportunity if you know what you're doing and you've already built a bunch of sites from the ground up. Then I think, test out an expired domain and see how it goes.
Sounds good. And you also mentioned video. And so do you get a lot of traffic from video? Do you get any social traffic? Or is it mostly just organic Google?
We just started. And the nice thing about video is it's like ranking in YouTube, it's wide open. So like you can put a video up today and it'll be ranking tomorrow. It's like the old days of Google, but it's a lot harder, in some ways, because you have to firstly get your channel above a certain level of subscribers and page views before you can monetize it. And then how you do the affiliate offers, in the description or the call outs, it's a little bit more of an art. And then, so for us, it's really a distribution channel. So what we'll do is we'll create the video, we'll upload it to YouTube, and then, ideally it'll start getting monetized on YouTube with ads at some point and or affiliate offers below, but also has a link back to the site, which helps on the SEO front, also helps as a traffic source. We'll also upload a video separately to the AdThrive or Mediavine player because that increases the RPM. And so we'll typically if we have an existing site, go to the articles that are already doing well and see how we can add video, and then we just distribute that to YouTube. So it's kind of like killing two birds with one stone. You can basically get the benefit of YouTube and having it hosted on your ad player, and it boosts your time on site, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of how we're doing it. I wouldn't say we've had like an amazing success yet, although we tend to rank pretty quickly once we get those videos up, and we've only been doing it for a couple months. So I'd say like, let's check back in a year and hopefully I'll have good things to share.
Do you also do social or any other sources of traffic?
We establish our social profile. I'd say Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, if you can. The big social platform outside of YouTube that I like is Pinterest, because it functions similarly to Google. It has its own algorithm. And it has search intent, which I think is the problem with Facebook is you're interrupting people watching cat videos. And so they're not really in the right mood necessarily to consume your content. They might be, but it's kind of hit or miss. Pinterest, it's like someone is basically going to a board where it's either inspiration or purchasing decisions that they're postponing. They're basically saying, I want this later. But like, to me, there's some level of intent, just like with Google. So I'd say in terms of my priority for what I'm focusing on, it would be Google organic is the bread and butter. That's the first thing. Then I would say YouTube. Then I would say email marketing. Then I would say Pinterest. Those four things are the most important things we're trying to build competency in. And then all the other social channels are like, okay, great, but I don't have any insight or expectation that they're going to deliver a lot of traffic.
Well, thank you, Ewen. That was a really interesting discussion, and I've personally learned quite a bit about building new sites. Although I have started myself by building sites, but quickly kind of transitioned to buying, and it's always interesting to hear about different alternative strategies. So yeah, any final tips or advice to our listeners, and also let us know how can people reach you if they have a question or learn more about you.
Sure. I mean, I don't really have anything to pitch or sell other than I have a LinkedIn profile. You can check me out there. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has. We are putting together like these, we call the incubator funds. It's not for everyone. There's still a ton of risk with it, but if someone is interested in like exploring that, that's something that we could see. We're kind of oversubscribed on our current round, but in the future, maybe in 6 to 9 months, we'll be looking at putting together another one. If all works, it might not work, and then I won't need any more investment if it didn't work. But let's just reach out to me via LinkedIn and let's chat. But either way, even if it's just for help on something or advice, I'm a big fan of just paying it forward and helping people out. And so just feel free to reach out to me, and would be happy to discuss.
All sounds good. Thank you, and have a good day.
All right. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
Domain Magnate is a leader in buying and selling online businesses with a proven track record of expertise gained from over 300 deals since 2004. To learn more about how we can help you acquire or exit a profitable online business today, head over to domainmagnate.com for more details.